The recruitment station on Kepler Station buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy lined up to join the Galactic Defense Corps. Towering Thraxians flexed their four muscular arms, their natural armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Sleek Fortani checked their plasma rifles with practiced efficiency, their cat-like reflexes making even simple movements look deadly. The insectoid Zephyrites clicked their mandibles while calibrating their energy weapons, compound eyes scanning for potential threats. In the middle of this impressive display of galactic military might stood Elena Vasquez, looking distinctly out of place. At 5 feet 4 inches, she barely reached the shoulder plates of most other recruits. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes held a quiet confidence that seemed almost laughable given her circumstances. What made her stand out most, however, was the weapon slung across her back. While everyone else carried sleek energy weapons that hummed with power, Elena carried what looked like a museum piece. The rifle was made of wood and metal, with intricate engravings along its stock. It had clearly seen better days. The wood was worn smooth in places where countless hands had gripped it, and the metal showed signs of careful maintenance rather than factory freshness. "Is that thing even functional?" sneered Crix, a Thraxian whose natural armor was polished to mirror brightness. His 4 arms gestured dismissively at Elena's rifle. "It looks like something from a primitive world's history museum." Elena shifted slightly, adjusting the rifle's position on her shoulder. "It works fine, thank you." "Fine." Crix's laugh rumbled like falling rocks. "Look around you, little human. This is the modern era. We have weapons that can punch through starship hulls. What can that antique possibly do that hasn't been improved upon 1,000 times over?" The other recruits began to take notice of the conversation. A group of Vortani approached, their movements fluid and predatory. Their leader, a female named Scylla, had scars across her face that spoke of real combat experience. 8 rounds, Scylla said, having overheard the conversation. Her keen eyes had quickly assessed Elena's rifle. "That's what those primitive projectile weapons hold, correct?" 8 small metal bullets. Elena nodded. 8 rounds, yes. 8 rounds, Scylla repeated, then laughed. It was a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "I carry enough energy packs to fire continuously for 3 hours. My rifle can adjust its power output from stunning small creatures to melting through reinforced barriers. And you're telling me that 8 pieces of metal are supposed to be adequate for galactic combat?" More recruits gathered around now, drawn by the unusual sight of someone carrying such an obviously outdated weapon. The Zephyrites chittered among themselves, their translation devices rendering their commentary into standard galactic. Primitive human still uses chemical propulsion for projectiles. Inefficient. Outdated. Amusing. Elena remained calm throughout the growing crowd's commentary. She'd heard it all before during her journey to the recruitment station. Every spaceport, every transport, every waiting area had provided someone eager to point out how backward her weapon was. "Tell me, human," said Vorik, a massive Thraxian whose armor bore the scars of countless battles. "What's the effective range of that relic?" "Depends on the target and conditions," Elena replied. "But accurately?" "About 800 meters with iron sights." The crowd erupted in laughter. Scylla wiped tears from her eyes. 800 meters? My sidearm has an effective range of 3 kilometers. My main rifle can reach targets at 15 kilometers with perfect accuracy thanks to computer assistance. "And ammunition?" pressed Crix. "How much can you carry for that thing?" Elena patted a small pouch on her belt. "I've got about 40 rounds with me." 40 rounds. Vorik's bellow of laughter echoed through the station. "I carry enough energy for 12,000 shots, and I can recharge from any power source. Solar, thermal, electrical, nuclear. My weapon adapts to whatever's available." A new voice cut through the laughter. "What's all this commotion about?" The crowd parted to reveal Drill Sergeant Koroth, a grizzled veteran whose species was difficult to identify due to the numerous cybernetic enhancements covering his body. His left arm had been replaced entirely with a mechanical limb that could interface with any known weapon system, and his right eye glowed with the soft blue light of a tactical display. "Sir," Crix straightened to attention, "this human recruit is carrying primitive projectile weapon. We were just discussing how inadequate it is for modern warfare." Koroth's remaining organic eye studied Elena, and her rifle with interest. Is that so? And what's your assessment, recruit? Vasquez, sir. Elena Vasquez, Earth Defense Corps, transferred to Galactic Defense Corps. She stood at attention, but didn't seem intimidated by the sergeant's imposing presence. Earth Defense Corps, Koroth mused. I've heard interesting stories about Earth's military. Very unconventional approaches to problem solving. And this weapon? M1 Garand, sir. Manufactured 1943, Earth calendar. It's been in my family for 6 generations. 6 generations, the sergeant repeated slowly. And it still functions? Yes, sir. My great-great-great-grandfather carried it on Earth during something called World War II. It's been maintained and used by someone in my family ever since. The gathered recruits exchanged glances. 6 generations was a long time for any weapon to remain functional. But for a primitive projectile weapon, it seemed impossible. Demonstrate, Koroth commanded simply. Elena looked around the crowded recruitment area. Sir, this probably isn't the best place to. The firing range, Koroth clarified. Everyone, follow me. Let's see what this primitive weapon can actually do. The recruitment station's firing range was state-of-the-art, with holographic targets that could simulate any environment and threat level. Advanced sensors tracked every shot with perfect accuracy, displaying trajectory, impact force, and effectiveness ratings on large screens for everyone to see. Koroth gestured to the range controls. Standard combat scenario. Urban environment, multiple targets at varying distances. Mix of armored and unarmored opponents. He looked at Elena. Think your 8 rounds can handle it. Elena nodded and approached the firing line. The other recruits crowded behind the safety barrier, many of them activating recording devices. This was either going to be an embarrassing failure or, well, they couldn't imagine any other possibility. The holographic environment materialized around Elena. She found herself standing in what appeared to be a war-torn city street. Buildings rose on either side, some damaged, providing multiple angles of potential attack. The scenario was designed to test a recruit's ability to quickly identify and engage multiple threats while managing limited resources. Scenario active, the range computer announced. Multiple hostile contacts. Threat level, high. Recommended ammunition expenditure, 20 to 30 rounds minimum. Elena brought the rifle to her shoulder, the worn wooden stock settling against her cheek with familiar comfort. Her breathing slowed, and her stance shifted slightly. To the watching recruits, she suddenly looked different. The nervous human girl had been replaced by someone who clearly knew exactly what they were doing. The first target appeared, a holographic soldier stepping out from behind a damaged vehicle at 200 meters. Elena's rifle cracked once, the sound sharp and distinctive compared to the hum of energy weapons. The target dropped immediately. One down, someone muttered. A second target appeared on a rooftop, partially concealed behind what remained of a wall. Elena's rifle spoke again, and the target fell backward out of sight. 2. Now multiple targets began appearing rapidly, the computer program escalating the difficulty as it detected her accuracy. A group of 3 targets rushed from an alley, weaving between debris. Elena's rifle fired 3 times in rapid succession, each shot finding its mark. 5 down, Scylla whispered, her mocking tone from earlier completely gone. 2 more targets appeared at maximum range, barely visible as small figures in distant windows. Elena took a moment longer to line up these shots, her breathing controlled and steady. 2 more cracks from the rifle, 2 more targets eliminated. 7. The range fell silent except for the hum of the holographic projectors. Elena remained in position, rifle ready, scanning for the final threat. The computer seemed to be taking its time, probably calculating the most challenging possible shot for the last target. When it came, it was brutal. A figure appeared at extreme range, moving at full sprint across a gap between buildings. The target was visible for maybe 2 seconds, a tiny figure against the holographic sky. Elena's rifle fired its 8th and final round. The distant target tumbled and disappeared. Scenario complete, the computer announced. All targets eliminated. Accuracy, 100%. Ammunition efficiency, maximum possible. Time to completion, 47 seconds. Overall rating, perfect score. The firing range was dead silent. Several of the recruits were staring at the efficiency ratings displayed on the screen. Perfect accuracy was one thing. Computer-assisted weapons could achieve that. But the speed, the smooth transitions between targets, the way Elena had managed her limited ammunition. 47 seconds, Karoth said quietly. Computer, what's the average completion time for this scenario? Average completion time for successful runs, 3 minutes, 22 seconds. Average ammunition expenditure, 28 rounds. Elena shouldered her rifle and turned to face the group. Her expression was calm, professional. She didn't look smug or superior, just like someone who had completed a routine task. How? Scylla's voice was barely above a whisper. The range computer said you should have needed at least 20 rounds minimum. You used 8. Exactly 8. Training, Elena said simply. When you only have 8 rounds, you make every shot count. You learn to identify the most dangerous targets first. You learn to anticipate movement patterns. You learn to trust your instincts instead of relying on computer assistance. Crix's 4 arms hung limply at his sides. But the accuracy, without computer assistance. My ancestors fought wars where missing a shot could mean death, Elena explained. They passed down everything they learned. How to read wind patterns by watching leaves move. How to estimate range using objects in the environment. How to control breathing and heartbeat to maintain steady aim. These skills don't require technology. Vorik shook his massive head in disbelief. But surely modern weapons are still superior. Rate of fire, ammunition capacity, adaptability. In many situations, absolutely, Elena agreed. I'm not claiming this rifle is better than modern weapons. I'm saying it's different. It forces you to think differently, to approach problems differently. Karoth stepped forward, his cybernetic eye still recording and analyzing what he had witnessed. Recruit Vasquez, that was the most efficient run of that scenario I've seen in 15 years of training recruits. The computer had to escalate to maximum difficulty by the end because you were eliminating targets faster than it could generate them. The gathering of recruits was processing this information in stunned silence. Everything they thought they knew about primitive weapons had just been challenged. Sir, Elena said, if I may ask, what happens now? Karoth's scarred face might have been attempting a smile, though it was difficult to tell with all his cybernetic modifications. Now, recruit, you get to show the rest of the galaxy what Earth's defense core has been up to while everyone else was upgrading their technology. He turned to address the other recruits. Pay attention to this human. You might learn something. The galaxy is a big place, full of situations your fancy weapons weren't designed for. Sometimes the old ways work because they've had centuries to prove themselves. As the group began to disperse, Elena heard fragments of conversation in dozens of languages and from dozens of species. The tone had changed completely from the earlier mocking. Now there was curiosity, respect, even a little fear. Did you see how she moved? Like she was part of the weapon itself. 8 shots, 8 targets. No computer assistance at all. How is that even possible? Maybe there's more to these humans than we thought. Elena remained at the firing line for a moment longer, checking her rifle's condition and reloading it with practiced efficiency. The familiar motions were soothing after being the center of attention. As she worked, she noticed Karoth approaching again. Tell me something, Vasquez, the drill sergeant said quietly. That performance was impressive, but I have the feeling there's more to your story. Earth doesn't send someone to galactic service just because they're a good shot. Elena finished loading her rifle and looked up at him. No, sir, they don't. Care to elaborate? Elena was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. I requested transfer to galactic service after what happened at the Proxima colony. Karoth's cybernetic eye flared slightly brighter. He was accessing files. Proxima colony, terrorist incident 6 months ago. Hostage situation. Galactic Defense Corps lost a full platoon trying to resolve it. His eye dimmed as he finished reading. The report says a single Earth Defense Corps specialist resolved the situation with minimal casualties. That was you. Yes, sir. 8 hostiles eliminated. 43 hostages rescued unharmed. The after-action report is classified, but Karoth studied her carefully. 43 lives saved. 8 shots fired. Elena nodded, but didn't elaborate. And now you want to join galactic service because? Because situations like Proxima are going to happen again, Elena said quietly. The galaxy is getting more dangerous, and sometimes the conventional solutions don't work. Sometimes you need someone who thinks differently. Karoth was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Around them, the normal activities of the recruitment station continued, but there was a different energy now. Word was spreading about what had happened in the firing range. Vasquez, Karoth said finally, I think your timing is perfect. We just received orders about a new assignment that's been giving conventional forces trouble. Interested? What kind of trouble, sir? The kind where 8 rounds might be exactly what we need. Elena shouldered her rifle and nodded. Yes, sir. I'm interested. As they walked away from the firing range, Elena could feel the eyes of every recruit and instructor following them. The ancient Earth rifle that had seemed so obsolete an hour ago now looked different to everyone who saw it. It looked dangerous. It looked like a weapon with a history and a purpose that went far beyond what its simple appearance suggested. The galaxy was about to learn what Elena's ancestors had known for generations. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the most effective ones. Sometimes experience and skill matter more than technology and firepower. And sometimes 8 rounds in the hands of someone who knows how to use them can change everything. Behind them, the recruitment station buzzed with new conversations. The story was already spreading. How a small human with an ancient rifle had achieved a perfect score on a scenario that stumped recruits with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. But Elena wasn't thinking about that anymore. She was thinking about the new assignment Karoth had mentioned and wondering what kind of problem required exactly 8 rounds to solve. The briefing room aboard the GDC cruiser Stellar Justice was packed with the finest military minds in the galaxy. Holographic displays showed tactical data from multiple angles, and the air hummed with tension. Elena sat quietly in the back row, her ancient rifle propped against her chair, drawing curious glances from the assembled officers. Commander Thex, a seasoned Vortani with silver fur and battle scars across his left cheek, stood before the main display. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many good soldiers die. The situation on Kythera Station is unprecedented. For those just joining us, here's what we're dealing with. The holographic display shifted to show a massive orbital station, its multiple sections connected by transit tubes and docking arrays. Kythera Station was one of the galaxy's most important trading hubs, positioned at the intersection of 3 major hyperspace lanes. 72 hours ago, a terrorist group calling themselves the Purification Front seized control of Kythera Station. They've taken approximately 2,000 civilians hostage, including delegates from the Galactic Council who were there for trade negotiations. Elena studied the station's layout, noting the choke points and defensive positions. The structure was a nightmare for assault forces. Too many corridors, too many places for defenders to set up ambushes. The terrorists are well-equipped and highly trained, Commander Thex continued. Intelligence suggests they have military-grade energy weapons, portable shield generators, and advanced sensor equipment. They've also demonstrated detailed knowledge of the station's layout and security systems. Colonel Urex, a massive Thraxian whose 4 arms were folded across his armored chest, leaned forward. What about their demands? They want the Galactic Council to withdraw all military forces from the frontier worlds and recognize their right to purify the galaxy of what they call genetic contamination. Commander Thex's expression showed what he thought of those demands. Essentially, they're xenophobic fanatics who want to eliminate any species they consider inferior. Captain Voss, a human officer Elena didn't recognize, raised his hand. What assets do they have on the station? Intelligence estimates between 30 and 40 hostiles, though the exact number is unclear. They've disabled most of the station's internal sensors and established overlapping fields of fire in all major corridors. Thex paused, his expression darkening. 3 assault attempts have already failed. We've lost a full platoon of Galactic Defense Corps Marines and 2 special operations teams. A murmur ran through the briefing room. Losing that many trained soldiers meant the terrorists were exceptionally well-prepared and dangerous. The problem, Thex continued, is that conventional assault tactics aren't working. The station's layout favors the defenders, and they have too much firepower concentrated in too small a space. Every approach we've tried has resulted in heavy casualties and no progress. Elena shifted in her seat, her tactical mind already working through the problem. The station's corridors would be death traps for large assault teams, but they also created limitations for the defenders. In tight spaces, superior numbers meant less, and heavy weapons became harder to maneuver. "Sir," she said quietly, raising her hand. Commander Thex looked surprised. He'd almost forgotten the human recruit was in the briefing. "Yes, Specialist Vasquez? What's the timeline for resolution? Are the hostiles threatening to execute hostages if demands aren't met?" "They've given the Galactic Council 96 hours to comply with their demands. That was 3 days ago. We have approximately 18 hours remaining." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "And what's the hostage situation? Are they all confined to one area, or spread throughout the station?" Colonel Urexa's forearms gestured dismissively. "What does it matter? We can't get to any of them without going through the terrorists' defensive positions. They've turned every approach into a killing field." "It matters," Elena said calmly, "because it tells us how many guards they can afford to keep with the hostages versus how many they need for defense. If the hostages are centralized, they're using fewer guards to watch them. If they're spread out, their defensive force is smaller." Commander Thex studied her with new interest. "Intelligence suggests most hostages are being held in the station's main conference center. It's a large space that can accommodate everyone, and it only has 2 entrances that can be easily defended." Elena processed this information. "So they've got maybe 5 or 6 guards watching 2,000 people, which means the rest are manning defensive positions throughout the station. Approximately 35 combatants spread across 12 defensive positions," confirmed Captain Voss. "Each position is mutually supporting, with overlapping fields of fire. Take out one position, and the others can engage any assault force." "Sir," Elena said, standing up. "Request permission to study the station schematics in detail." Commander Thex hesitated. This human specialist had an impressive record, but she was still relatively new to galactic service. "Specialist, we've had our best tactical minds analyzing this situation for 3 days. What makes you think?" "Because I think differently than your best tactical minds, sir," Elena interrupted respectfully. "You've been trying to solve this with overwhelming force and superior technology. But sometimes the solution isn't more firepower. Sometimes it's precision." The room fell quiet. Elena could feel dozens of eyes on her, many of them skeptical. She was suggesting that she could solve a problem that had already cost the lives of an entire platoon of elite soldiers. "Explain," Thex said simply. Elena moved to the holographic display, her fingers manipulating the controls to zoom in on specific sections of the station. "Every assault team you've sent has tried to fight through the defensive positions to reach the hostages. That's exactly what the terrorists expect. They've planned for overwhelming force, heavy weapons, and coordinated team assaults." She highlighted several corridors on the display. "But look at the actual problem. You don't need to destroy all their defensive positions. You just need to neutralize their leadership and create enough confusion to get the hostages to safety." Colonel Urex snorted. "And how do you propose to do that? Walk through their defensive lines?" "Something like that," Elena said seriously. "Sir, what's the composition of the terrorist force? Are they all the same species?" Captain Voss consulted his datapad. "Mixed group. Mostly humanoid species. Humans, Centaurians, Deltans, a few others." "What?" Elena was quiet for a moment, studying the station layout. Something was taking shape in her mind. A plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. "Sir, I need to know more about their equipment and tactics. The 3 failed assault attempts. Can I see the after-action reports?" Commander Thex looked uncertain, but gestured to Captain Voss, who transferred the files to Elena's datapad. She spent several minutes reading through the reports, her expression growing more thoughtful. "They're good," she said finally. "Very good. Military training, probably special forces background. They know how to use the station's layout to maximum advantage, and they've positioned themselves to counter every conventional tactic. That's what makes them so dangerous," Thex agreed. "And why we've lost so many people trying to dig them out." Elena looked up from the datapad. "Sir, I think I can resolve this situation. But I'll need to do it alone. And I'll need you to trust me completely." The briefing room erupted in protests. Colonel Urex stood up, all 4 arms gesticulating angrily. "Absolutely not. We're not sending one person, one human with a primitive weapon, against 35 trained terrorists. Colonel, Elena said calmly, how many people have you lost trying it your way? The question hit like a physical blow. Urex's arms dropped to his sides, his expression pained. Too many good soldiers had died in the failed assault attempts. Commander Thex studied Elena carefully. Explain your plan. I can't, sir. Not in detail. If I'm wrong about any part of it, people die. But I can tell you this. Every conventional approach has failed because you're trying to fight them on their terms. You're bringing energy weapons to an energy weapon fight, assault teams to an assault team fight. They've prepared for everything you can throw at them. She gestured to her rifle. But they haven't prepared for this. They haven't prepared for someone who fights the way my ancestors did. They haven't prepared for 8 rounds that don't miss. The room was silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Elena could see the internal struggle on Commander Thex's face. Everything in his training told him this was madness. You didn't send one person against an entrenched force of 35 terrorists. Specialist, he said finally, even if I were inclined to approve this insane plan, how would you even get onto the station? They've sealed all the docking bays and are monitoring all approaches. Elena smiled for the first time since the briefing began. Sir, I'm betting they haven't seen anything like a human combat infiltration before. We've been doing this for a very long time. Captain Voss leaned forward. What do you need? A maintenance suit, basic life support, and a way to get close to the station without being detected. My ancestors fought wars where one person with the right skills could change everything. They passed those skills down through my family for exactly these moments. Commander Thex looked around the room, seeing the doubt and skepticism on most faces. But he also saw something else, the desperate understanding that conventional methods weren't working. Colonel Urex, he said finally, what's your assessment? The massive Thraxian was quiet for a long moment. Sir, every instinct I have says this is suicide. We're talking about sending one person against an entire terrorist cell. He paused, his 4 arms flexing unconsciously. But we've already lost 43 good soldiers trying it the conventional way. Maybe it's time to try something unconventional. Elena felt a surge of gratitude toward the Thraxian. He didn't understand her approach, but he was willing to trust her. Captain Voss, Thex continued, can we get Specialist Vasquez onto the station undetected? Voss studied the tactical displays. There's a maintenance airlock on the station's lower section. It's not heavily monitored because it's not considered a viable entry point. Too much open space to cross before reaching cover. But for one person, that'll work, Elena said immediately. I can reach it and get inside without being detected. And then, what? Demanded Colonel Urex. Even if you get aboard, you still have to deal with 35 armed terrorists. Elena shouldered her rifle, the familiar weight comforting against her back. Then, I do what my family has been doing for 6 generations, Colonel. I make every shot count. The briefing broke up with a mixture of hope and dread. Most of the officers thought they were witnessing either the most brilliant tactical decision in recent memory or the most catastrophic mistake. Elena spent the next hour studying every detail of the station layout, memorizing guard positions and patrol patterns. As the shuttle prepared to take her to the insertion point, Sergeant Koroth approached her in the hangar bay. Vasquez, he said quietly, I've been thinking about Proxima Colony. Elena looked up from checking her equipment. Sir, 8 hostiles eliminated, 43 hostages rescued. But the report doesn't say how you did it. 43 people in a confined space, 8 armed terrorists with energy weapons, and you resolved it without a single hostage casualty. Elena finished adjusting her rifle sling. Sometimes, Sergeant, the old ways work better than the new ones. Care to elaborate? Elena smiled grimly. Energy weapons are loud, Sergeant. They light up every sensor. They leave energy signatures. They announce your presence to everyone in the area. Sometimes you need to work quietly. Sometimes you need to be invisible until the moment you strike. She headed toward the shuttle, then paused and looked back. The terrorists on Kythera Station are expecting another assault team with energy weapons and heavy equipment. They're prepared for everything the Galactic Defense Corps can throw at them. And they're not prepared for you. Elena's smile was cold and confident. Sergeant, they have no idea what's coming. As the shuttle launched toward Kythera Station, Elena settled into her seat and began the mental preparation her family had passed down through generations. Soon, 35 terrorists were going to discover what Earth's soldiers had known for centuries. Sometimes the oldest weapons, in the right hands, were the most deadly. The cold vacuum of space pressed against Elena's maintenance suit as she drifted toward Kythera Station's lower maintenance airlock. The massive structure loomed above her like a metal mountain, its lights creating a constellation against the star field beyond. She had been floating in the darkness for 47 minutes, using minimal thruster burns to adjust her trajectory. To the station's sensors, she was just another piece of space debris. Elena's breathing was controlled and steady, each exhale recycled through the suit's life support systems. Her rifle was mag-locked to her back, its familiar weight a source of comfort even in the harsh environment of space. She had done insertions like this before, but never with so much riding on the outcome. 2,000 innocent lives, 35 heavily armed terrorists, one human with 8 rounds. The maintenance airlock was exactly where Captain Voss had indicated, a seldom-used entry point designed for routine exterior repairs. Elena's suit sensors showed no energy signatures nearby, which meant the terrorists weren't actively monitoring this section. They had focused their attention on the main docking bays and transport tubes where they expected conventional assault forces to approach. Elena activated her suit's magnetic grapples and pulled herself along the station's hull toward the airlock. The external controls were standard galactic design, meant to be operated by maintenance workers in emergency situations. She interfaced her suit's computer with the airlock system and began the entry sequence. The outer door cycled open with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. Elena pulled herself inside and sealed the door behind her. As atmosphere filled the small chamber, she could hear the distant vibrations of the station's machinery through the hull. Somewhere in this massive structure, 2,000 people were waiting to die, not knowing that help was coming in the form of one human with an antique rifle. The inner door opened into a maintenance corridor, dimly lit and filled with the hum of environmental systems. Elena removed her helmet and took a breath of recycled station air. It smelled of metal and ozone, with the faint chemical tang of life support systems working at full capacity. She unstrapped her rifle and performed a quick function check. The weapon was exactly as it should be, ready, loaded, and waiting for her command. Elena had carried this rifle through dozens of training exercises and 3 real combat situations. It had never let her down. Moving through the maintenance corridors required all of Elena's infiltration training. The terrorists had proven themselves to be professionals, which meant they might have sensors monitoring areas they weren't actively patrolling. Elena moved like a ghost, her footsteps silent on the metal decking, her breathing controlled, her movements deliberate and economical. According to the station schematics, she was currently in the lower engineering section. The main conference center where the hostages were being held was 12 levels up and 3 sections over. Between her and the hostages were at least 6 terrorist defensive positions, each manned by teams of 3 to 5 combatants. Elena reached the first major decision point, a junction where the maintenance corridors connected to the main transit system. Intelligence reports indicated the terrorists had sensors monitoring all main corridors, but the maintenance areas were largely ignored. She could stay hidden longer in the maintenance sections, but eventually she would have to enter the main areas of the station. She chose to continue through maintenance for now, working her way upward through service shafts and utility tunnels. The route was longer and more difficult, but it kept her invisible to the terrorist surveillance network. As Elena climbed through a vertical service shaft, her comm unit crackled with a brief transmission on an encrypted frequency. It was a status check from the Stellar Justice, maintaining minimal contact to avoid detection. Shadow 2, this is Control. Status report. Elena keyed her comm unit once for proceeding as planned and continued climbing. She was now 8 levels up from her entry point, getting closer to the station's populated areas. The first sign that she was approaching terrorist-controlled territory was the smell. The air recycling systems carried scents from different parts of the station, and Elena detected the distinctive odor of scared humans mixed with the metallic tang of energy weapons that had been recently fired. She paused at a maintenance access panel and carefully activated a fiber-optic viewer to observe the corridor beyond. What she saw confirmed the intelligence reports and told her something new about her opponents. The corridor was a main transit route between sections, and the terrorists had turned it into a killing field. Energy weapon emplacements were positioned at both ends, with overlapping fields of fire that would catch any assault team in deadly crossfire. But, more importantly, Elena could see the quality of their positioning and equipment. These weren't desperate fanatics. They were experienced soldiers who had planned this operation carefully. Their positions were textbook perfect, their equipment was military grade, and their discipline was evident in the way they maintained their posts without unnecessary chatter or movement. Elena closed the viewer and continued through the maintenance system. She now knew she was dealing with genuine professionals, which made her job harder, but also more predictable. Professional soldiers followed patterns and procedures. They could be anticipated and countered if you understood their training. 3 levels higher, Elena reached the point where she could no longer avoid the main corridors. The maintenance shafts didn't extend to the upper levels where the hostages were being held. She would have to enter the terrorist-controlled areas and work her way through their defensive network. Elena found herself looking at another maintenance access panel, this one leading to a secondary corridor that connected to the main transit routes. According to her mental map of the station, she was now within the terrorists' outer perimeter. She opened the panel carefully and slipped into the corridor beyond. The lighting here was different, emergency illumination that cast harsh shadows and created blind spots. The terrorists had adjusted the environment to favor defensive positions and limit the effectiveness of assault teams. Elena moved through the shadows like her ancestors had moved through the jungles and cities of Earth's wars. Every step was calculated, every movement planned. She was hunting now, and the skills passed down through 6 generations of soldiers guided her actions. The first terrorist position was around the next corner. Elena could hear their voices, 2 males speaking in standard Galactic, discussing patrol schedules and guard rotations. Their conversation told her several important things. They were maintaining professional discipline, they weren't expecting any immediate threats, and they were confident in their defensive preparations. Elena approached the corner and used a small mirror device to observe the position. 2 humanoid figures in combat armor, positioned behind a portable energy shield generator. Both carried military-grade plasma rifles and had additional equipment packs that suggested they were prepared for extended operations. The positioning was exactly what she expected from professional soldiers. They had clear sight lines down the corridor, cover from return fire, and communication links to other defensive positions. Taking them out with energy weapons would trigger alarms and alert the entire terrorist network. Elena studied the position for several minutes, noting every detail. The guards changed positions occasionally, but maintained their overlapping fields of fire. They were well-trained and disciplined. But they had one weakness that their training hadn't prepared them for. They weren't expecting someone who could kill silently at distance with a weapon their sensors couldn't detect. Elena moved back down the corridor to a position that would give her the angle she needed. The range was about 60 meters, an easy shot with her rifle. She found a stable firing position using a support beam for rest and calculated her shot carefully. Wind wasn't a factor in the station's controlled environment. Gravity was standard galactic normal. The targets were stationary. Elena's breathing slowed as she entered the focused mental state her family had passed down through generations. Her rifle spoke once, the crack of the gunshot echoing through the corridors. The first guard dropped instantly, his plasma rifle clattering to the deck. His companion spun toward the sound, trying to locate the source of the attack. Elena's rifle fired again. The second guard fell before he could raise an alarm. 2 down, 6 to go. Elena moved quickly to the terrorist position and secured their equipment. The guards were definitely military trained. Their armor was top quality, their weapons were well maintained, and their equipment packs contained everything needed for extended operations. More concerning was what she found in their communication gear. The terrorists weren't just monitoring galactic defense frequencies. They were actively jamming communications between the assault teams and their command ships. They had also set up a sophisticated network of sensors that should have detected any conventional assault force long before it reached the outer defensive positions. Elena realized why the previous assault attempts had failed so completely. The terrorists weren't just defending the station. They were actively hunting the assault teams, using superior intelligence and equipment to turn every engagement into an ambush. But their sensor network was designed to detect energy signatures, movement patterns, and communication signals typical of modern military units. Elena's chemical propellant rifle didn't register on their threat detection systems. Her solitary approach didn't match any recognized assault patterns. And her complete communication silence meant she was invisible to their intelligence gathering. Elena continued deeper into the terrorist-controlled territory, moving between their defensive positions like a ghost. Her route took her through service corridors, emergency stairwells, and utility areas that the terrorists had dismissed as insignificant. The second defensive position was more challenging. 3 guards in a larger space with multiple approach routes. They were positioned to cover each other's blind spots and had established interlocking fields of fire that would stop any conventional assault. Elena spent 20 minutes studying their positions and movement patterns. These guards were more alert than the first pair, rotating their positions regularly and maintaining constant communication with other defensive positions. But they made one mistake that their training hadn't prepared them for. They were scanning for energy weapons, advanced sensors, and team-based assault patterns. They weren't watching for a single figure with a rifle that looked like a museum piece. Elena found a position in an upper-level maintenance area that gave her a clear view of all 3 guards. The range was longer this time, nearly 100 meters, but still well within her rifle's effective range. She took her time with these shots, knowing that any alarm would bring the entire terrorist network down on her position. Her rifle cracked 3 times in quick succession, each shot precisely placed and instantly lethal. All 3 guards dropped before any of them could react. 5 down, 3 to go. Elena was now in the heart of the terrorist-controlled territory, close enough to the main conference center that she could hear the distant sounds of hostages through the station's ventilation system. Voices, crying, the occasional shout of fear or anger. 2,000 people who didn't know that salvation was coming from someone they would never have expected. The final defensive position was the most dangerous. The terrorists had positioned their best people here, the last line of defense between any assault force and the hostages. According to Elena's mental map, she was looking at the elite guard team that protected the terrorist leadership and maintained control over the captives. Elena found an observation point and studied the final position carefully. What she saw made her realize just how professional this operation really was. The final 3 guards weren't just soldiers. They were specialists. Their equipment was a step above the others. Their positioning was perfect, and their coordination was flawless. These were the kind of people who had planned and executed the entire station takeover. More importantly, one of them was clearly the operational commander. Elena could tell by the way the others deferred to him and by the advanced communication equipment he carried. Taking out the commander would not only eliminate a dangerous opponent, but would also disrupt the entire terrorist network. Elena positioned herself for the final shots. The range was the longest yet, nearly 150 meters through a complex corridor system. She would have to account for multiple angles and the possibility that one of the guards might survive long enough to raise an alarm. Her breathing slowed to the rhythm her ancestors had used in wars across Earth's history. Her heartbeat steadied. Her vision focused until the entire universe narrowed to the rifle sights and the target beyond. Elena's rifle fired 3 times, the shots spaced exactly 2 seconds apart. The terrorist commander dropped first, his advanced communication gear sparking as it hit the deck. The second guard fell while reaching for his weapon. The third managed to turn toward the sound before Elena's final shot ended his threat permanently. 8 down, 0 to go. Elena's rifle was empty, its 8 rounds expended exactly as she had planned. But the real work was just beginning. She had eliminated the terrorist defensive network, but the hostages were still in danger from whoever was guarding them in the conference center. Elena reloaded her rifle and began moving toward the main conference center. Behind her lay the evidence of what one human with the right training and the right weapon could accomplish. Ahead lay 2,000 people who were about to discover that sometimes the old ways were still the best ways. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson that Earth's soldiers had known for centuries. Wars weren't won by the most advanced technology or the largest armies. They were won by individuals with the skill, courage, and determination to do whatever was necessary to protect innocent lives. Elena Vasquez was about to demonstrate exactly what that meant. Elena moved through the upper corridors of Kythera Station like a predator stalking prey. The silence was unnerving. No alarms, no shouting guards, no indication that the terrorist network had realized their outer defensive positions had been compromised. Her 8 precise shots had eliminated their security perimeter without triggering a single alert. The main conference center lay ahead, and Elena could hear the sounds of captivity more clearly now. Voices speaking in dozens of languages, the shuffling of feet, occasional sobs of fear or anger. 2,000 beings from across the galaxy, held prisoner by fanatics who believed in genetic purity and galactic cleansing. Elena found herself at the final approach to the conference center. According to the station schematics, the large chamber had 2 main entrances and several emergency exits. Intelligence reports suggested the terrorists had sealed most of the exits and were monitoring the main entrances with guards inside the chamber. She activated her comm unit for the first time since entering the station. "Control, this is Shadow 2. Outer perimeter neutralized. Moving to final objective." The response was immediate and tense. "Shadow 2, confirm status. 8 targets eliminated. Confirmed. Outer defensive network is down. Beginning final phase." "Roger that, Shadow 2. Standing by for extraction." Elena turned off her comm and approached the conference center carefully. The first thing she noticed was that the normal hum of conversation from inside had stopped. Something had changed in the last few minutes, and the hostages had gone quiet. She found a maintenance access that allowed her to observe the main conference center through a ventilation grate. What she saw made her blood run cold. The chamber was enormous, designed to hold diplomatic conferences between multiple galactic species. Rows of seating rose in tiers around a central speaking area, and the space could easily accommodate several thousand beings. Currently, it held about 2,000 hostages, all clustered in the lower seating areas under heavy guard. 6 terrorists with energy weapons were positioned around the chamber, their weapons trained on the captives. But Elena's attention was drawn to the central speaking area, where a figure in black armor was addressing the hostages through a personal amplifier. "Citizens of the galaxy," the figure was saying, "your governments have failed you. They have chosen to ignore our reasonable demands for galactic purity and the preservation of superior genetic lines. Therefore, we must demonstrate the consequences of their stubbornness." Elena realized with growing horror that the execution deadline had been moved up. The terrorists weren't waiting for the original timeline. Something had spooked them into accelerating their plans. "In 1 hour, the armored figure continued, we will begin selecting hostages for termination. We will continue until the Galactic Council agrees to our demands or until this chamber is silent." The hostages erupted into panicked voices in dozens of languages. Parents pulled children closer. Elderly beings wept openly. The diplomatic delegates who had come to Kythera Station for peaceful trade negotiations now faced execution by madmen. Elena studied the situation carefully. 7 terrorists in the chamber, 6 guards, and 1 leader. The guards were positioned to prevent any assault through the main entrances, but they were also positioned to massacre the hostages if threatened. Any conventional assault would result in a bloodbath. Energy weapons in an enclosed space with 2,000 civilians would be catastrophic. Even if assault teams could overwhelm the terrorists, hundreds of hostages would die in the crossfire. Elena counted her remaining ammunition carefully. 8 rounds loaded, 32 in reserve. More than enough for 7 targets. But the challenge wasn't marksmanship. It was preventing the terrorists from killing hostages before she could stop them all. She studied the terrorists' positions and realized they had made one crucial mistake. They were arranged to defend against assault teams coming through the main entrances. Their formation was perfect for stopping conventional military attacks, but it left them vulnerable to fire from unexpected angles. Elena moved through the maintenance system until she found an access point that would give her a clear shot at all 7 targets. The position was in an upper maintenance area overlooking the conference center, about 120 meters from the closest terrorist. she settled into her firing position and began calculating angles and distances. 7 targets at various ranges and positions, some partially concealed behind cover, all armed with weapons capable of killing dozens of hostages in seconds if they realized they were under attack. Elena's ancestors had faced similar situations during Earth's wars. Hostage situations where precision and speed meant the difference between rescue and massacre. They had developed techniques for multiple target engagements that prioritized threat elimination and hostage protection. Her breathing slowed as she entered the focused mental state that 6 generations of soldiers had passed down to her. The conference center fell away until only targets and sight pictures remained. Target 1, the leader in black armor, standing at the central podium. Highest priority, command, and control element. Range, 120 meters. Clear shot. Target 2, guard positioned near the main entrance, weapon trained on a group of families with children. Range, 95 meters. Partial cover behind a pillar. Target 3, guard in the upper seating area with a commanding view of the entire chamber. Range, 110 meters. Clear shot, but elevated position. Target 4, guard near the emergency exits, positioned to prevent escape attempts. Range, 130 meters. Clear shot. Target 5, guard with heavy weapon positioned to sweep the lower seating areas. Range, 80 meters. Clear shot, immediate threat to hostages. Target 6, guard monitoring the main entrance sensors. Range, 105 meters. Partial cover. Target 7, guard positioned as overwatch, weapon trained on the diplomatic delegates. Range, 115 meters. Clear shot. Elena calculated the engagement sequence. Priority targets first, those with the best position to harm hostages. Then, command elements. Finally, any remaining threats. The sequence would be 5, 7, 1, 3, 2, 4, 6. 7 shots in rapid succession, each one precisely placed to eliminate the threat before the terrorist could react. Elena's rifle came to her shoulder with the smooth motion of countless hours of training. Her breathing reached the perfect rhythm as she aligned the sights on her first target. The rifle cracked once. Guard 5 dropped instantly, his heavy weapon clattering harmlessly to the floor. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the chamber, causing confusion among both hostages and terrorists. Elena's rifle spoke again. Guard 7 fell backward from his overwatch position, his weapon spinning away from the diplomatic delegates. The terrorists were beginning to react now, but they were scanning for energy weapon signatures and assault team movement patterns. They couldn't locate the source of the attacks. Elena's third shot took down the black-armored leader, whose amplified voice cut off mid-sentence as he collapsed behind the central podium. Guards 3 and 2 fell in rapid succession, Elena's rifle firing with mechanical precision. The terrorists still alive were now in full panic, trying to locate an enemy they couldn't see or understand. Guard 4 spun toward the upper maintenance areas, finally, realizing the direction the shots were coming from. Elena's rifle cracked again, and he dropped before he could bring his weapon to bear. Guard 6, the last surviving terrorist, had taken cover behind the sensor station and was trying to activate some kind of emergency protocol. Elena could see him working frantically at the controls, probably trying to trigger automated defenses or call for backup. Her final shot ended his efforts permanently. 7 targets, 7 shots, 7 seconds of engagement time. The conference center fell into stunned silence. 2,000 hostages stared at the 7 fallen terrorists, unable to comprehend what had just happened. They had been seconds away from execution, and now their captors were dead. Elena activated her comm unit. Control, this is Shadow 2. All hostiles neutralized. Hostages are secure. The response was immediate and filled with disbelief. Shadow 2, confirm status. All terrorist forces eliminated. Confirmed. 7 targets in the conference center down. Total enemy casualties, 15. Hostage casualties, 0. 15 total. Shadow 2, intelligence estimated 30 to 40 hostiles on the station. Elena smiled grimly as she began moving toward the conference center to show herself to the hostages and begin organizing their evacuation. Control, your intelligence was accurate. There were 37 hostiles on the station. I eliminated all active combatants. The remaining 22 were support personnel who surrendered when they realized their operational team was gone. Elena entered the conference center through one of the main doors, her rifle visible, but held in a non-threatening position. The hostages stared at her in amazement, a single human woman who had somehow eliminated an entire terrorist cell. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings," Elena called out in standard Galactic. "This is Elena Vasquez, Galactic Defense Corps. You are safe. Evacuation ships are standing by." A Thraxian civilian, his forearms shaking with relief, stood up from the crowd. "How?" "There were dozens of them. We heard fighting for hours." "Actually, sir, the entire operation took about 90 minutes from infiltration to completion," Elena corrected gently. 15 shots, 15 targets eliminated. The rest surrendered when they realized they were fighting a losing battle. A human woman holding a small child looked at Elena's rifle with wonder. "What kind of weapon is that? I've never seen anything like it." Elena shouldered the antique rifle with pride. "It's an M1 Garand, ma'am. Made on Earth in 1943. It's been in my family for 6 generations, and it's never let us down." As Galactic Defense Corps evacuation teams began arriving through the main docking bays, Elena found herself surrounded by rescued hostages wanting to thank her personally. Beings from dozens of species, representing worlds across the galaxy, all united in their gratitude to one human with an ancient weapon. A Vortani diplomat approached her, his elegant features showing deep respect. "Specialist Vasquez, I am Ambassador Kellen from the Vortani Confederation. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I want to express our profound gratitude. You saved not just our lives, but the stability of galactic civilization." Elena nodded politely. "Just doing my job, sir." "But how?" pressed a Centaurian delegate. "The terrorists had modern weapons, advanced sensors, numerical superiority. How did one person with a primitive projectile weapon defeat them so completely?" Elena considered the question carefully. Around her, rescue teams worked to process the hostages and secure the station. The defeated terrorists, those who had survived, were being taken into custody with expressions of complete bewilderment. "Sir," Elena said finally, "sometimes the newest technology isn't the best technology. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the most effective ones. These terrorists prepared for energy weapons, assault teams, and modern military tactics. They didn't prepare for someone who fights the way humans fought on Earth for thousands of years." Commander Thex's voice crackled over Elena's comm unit. "Shadow 2, outstanding work. The entire galaxy will hear about what happened here today." Elena looked around the conference center, seeing the faces of 2,000 beings who had been given their lives back by 8 rounds from an antique rifle. Children who would grow up, parents who would return home, diplomats who would continue building bridges between worlds. "Control," she replied quietly. "I hope the galaxy learns the right lessons from this. Technology is important, but it's not everything. Training matters. Skill matters. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones." As Elena began making her way toward the evacuation ships, she overheard conversations among the rescued hostages that would soon spread across the galaxy. "Did you see her move? Like she was born to hunt. 15 shots, 15 targets. No wasted ammunition. She eliminated an entire terrorist cell with a weapon that looked like it belonged in a museum. How is that even possible?" Elena smiled as she boarded the evacuation shuttle. The galaxy was about to discover what Earth's soldiers had known for millennia. Wars weren't won by the most advanced technology or the largest armies. They were won by individuals with the right training, the right mindset, and the determination to do whatever was necessary to protect innocent lives. Her ancient rifle had just reminded the galaxy that sometimes the most effective weapon wasn't the newest or most sophisticated. Sometimes it was the one that had been tested and proven through generations of warriors who understood that every shot had to count, every decision had to be perfect, and failure was never an option. Elena Vasquez had just become a legend, and her rifle had become a symbol of something the galaxy had almost forgotten, that individual skill and determination could still change the course of history, even in an age of advanced technology and overwhelming firepower. 3 months after the Kythera Station incident, Elena stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Military Academy on Centauri Prime. The lecture hall was packed beyond capacity, with officers from every major species and military organization in the galaxy. Word of what had happened at Kythera Station had spread through military channels like wildfire, creating a demand for information that the Galactic Defense Corps could no longer ignore. Elena's ancient M1 Garand rested in a display case beside the podium, drawing curious glances from officers who carried weapons capable of destroying starships. To them, it looked impossibly primitive, a relic from a bygone era that somehow had defeated one of the most sophisticated terrorist operations in galactic history. Admiral Corson, a distinguished Thraxian whose 4 arms bore the decorations of a dozen campaigns, introduced Elena to the assembly. Officers and colleagues, 3 months ago we witnessed something unprecedented in modern galactic warfare. A single human specialist eliminated a terrorist cell of 37 individuals using a weapon manufactured over 2,000 years ago on her homeworld. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Even now, many found the story difficult to believe. The terrorist organization known as the Purification Front had defeated 3 separate assault teams using modern tactics and advanced weaponry. They held 2,000 hostages and threatened to destabilize galactic civilization itself. Specialist Elena Vasquez resolved this situation in 93 minutes with 15 shots from her family's antique rifle. Elena stepped to the podium, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes studying her. In the months since Kythera Station, she had been promoted, decorated, and studied by military analysts across the galaxy. But she remained fundamentally the same person, a soldier who believed in precision, training, and the lessons her ancestors had passed down. "Thank you, Admiral Corson," Elena began. "I've been asked to speak today about what happened at Kythera Station, and, more importantly, about what we can learn from it. But, before I discuss tactics and techniques, I want to address the question I know many of you are thinking." She gestured toward her rifle in its display case. "You're wondering how a primitive projectile weapon could be more effective than your advanced energy systems. You're wondering if this was just luck, or if there's something fundamentally different about Earth's approach to warfare." Colonel Vex, a Vortani Special Operations Commander, raised his hand. "Specialist Vasquez, our analysis of the Kythera incident shows that conventional assault tactics should have been successful. Superior firepower, advanced sensors, coordinated team movements. All the elements for victory were present in the failed attempts. What made your approach different?" Elena nodded. She had expected this question and had been preparing her answer for months. "Colonel, conventional tactics failed because the enemy was prepared for them. The Purification Front spent months studying galactic military doctrine, analyzing previous operations, and designing countermeasures for every approach we typically use." She activated a holographic display showing the layout of Kythera Station. They positioned sensors to detect energy weapons. They established kill zones optimized for stopping assault teams. They created overlapping fields of fire that would devastate any conventional force. Everything they did was designed to counter modern military methods. Captain Yaira, a human officer from the Terran Defense Corps, leaned forward. "But surely they would have considered the possibility of infiltration by individual operatives?" "They did," Elena confirmed. "But they prepared for infiltrators carrying modern equipment, stealth suits, energy weapons, electronic countermeasures. They didn't prepare for someone carrying a weapon their sensors couldn't detect, using tactics that predated their training by centuries." She manipulated the holographic display to show the approach routes she had used. "Every step of my infiltration was based on techniques developed by Earth's military during what we call the World Wars, global conflicts that occurred over 2 millennia ago. These techniques were developed by soldiers who had to succeed despite being outnumbered, outgunned, and facing technologically superior enemies." General Thox, a massive Thraxian whose scarred carapace spoke of decades of combat, spoke up. "Specialist, we've studied the tactical recordings from your insertion. You moved through that station like you knew exactly where every enemy was positioned." "How?" Elena smiled. "General, I didn't know where they were. But I understood how they would think. Professional soldiers follow patterns based on their training. Once I identified their skill level and tactical doctrine, I could predict where they would position themselves and how they would react to threats." "Explain," General Thox demanded. Elena brought up a detailed view of the first terrorist position she had encountered. These two guards were positioned exactly where their training manual would indicate. Overlapping fields of fire, cover from return fire, communication links to other positions. Their positioning was textbook perfect for stopping assault teams. She highlighted the angle from which she had engaged them. But their training didn't account for someone approaching from an unexpected vector using a silent weapon. They were scanning for energy signatures, listening for communication chatter, watching for team movements. A single projectile weapon fired from a concealed position wasn't in their threat assessment. Commander Scylla, the scarred Vortani who had mocked Elena's rifle at the recruitment station, stood up. Specialist, I owe you an apology. I said your 8 rounds were inadequate for modern combat. You've proven me spectacularly wrong. But I still don't understand the fundamentals. How do you achieve perfect accuracy without computer assistance? Elena had been hoping someone would ask this question. Commander, my ancestors fought wars where missing a shot could mean death, not just for them, but for their entire unit. They developed techniques for achieving accuracy that don't depend on technology. She gestured for the audience's attention as she began demonstrating basic shooting positions. Proper breathing control, consistent sight picture, natural point of aim, follow through. These techniques have remained unchanged for over 2,000 years because they work. A human shooter who masters these fundamentals can achieve accuracy that rivals or exceeds computer-assisted systems. Captain Rel, a Zephyrite whose compound eyes could track multiple targets simultaneously, clicked his mandibles in confusion. But the rate of fire, the ammunition limitations, surely these are significant disadvantages? In some situations, absolutely, Elena agreed. But limitations can also be advantages if you know how to use them. When you only have 8 rounds, you don't waste shots on uncertain targets. You wait for perfect opportunities. You make every shot count. She activated another holographic display showing the timeline of her engagement with the terrorist guards. Each shot I fired was calculated for maximum effect. I prioritized targets based on threat level, position, and the likelihood of raising alarms. 7 shots eliminated 7 terrorists in 7 seconds because each shot was planned and executed perfectly. Admiral Corson leaned forward with interest. Specialist, you've mentioned your ancestors several times. Can you explain how ancient Earth military techniques remain relevant in the age of galactic warfare? Elena had been building toward this question throughout her presentation. Admiral, Earth's military history is unique in the galaxy. For thousands of years, we fought wars using primitive weapons against opponents who were often technologically superior. We learned to win through training, tactics, and individual skill rather than overwhelming firepower. She gestured toward her rifle again. This weapon represents that philosophy. It's not the most advanced tool available, but it's reliable, accurate, and effective in the hands of someone properly trained to use it. More importantly, it represents an approach to warfare that values precision over volume, skill over technology, and adaptability over rigid doctrine. Colonel Vex raised his hand again. Are you suggesting that galactic militaries should abandon advanced weaponry in favor of primitive projectile weapons? Elena shook her head emphatically. Absolutely not, Colonel. I'm suggesting that we shouldn't abandon the fundamentals that make any weapon effective. Modern energy weapons are superior to projectile weapons in almost every measurable way. But they're only as good as the person using them. She brought up casualty statistics from recent galactic conflicts. Our analysis shows that accuracy rates in actual combat are significantly lower than in training scenarios, despite computer-assisted targeting systems. Soldiers become dependent on technology and lose the fundamental skills that my ancestors considered essential. General Thox studied the statistics with obvious concern. What do you recommend? Cross-training, Elena said immediately. Every soldier in galactic service should learn to fight effectively without technological assistance. Not because they'll need to use primitive weapons, but because learning these fundamentals will make them more effective with advanced weapons. She activated a final holographic display showing proposed training scenarios. Marksmanship training with unassisted weapons. Navigation without computer guidance. Communication using basic methods when electronic systems fail. These skills don't replace modern technology, they enhance it. Captain Yaira nodded thoughtfully. Create soldiers who can adapt to any situation rather than soldiers who depend on specific equipment. Exactly, Elena confirmed. The terrorists at Kythera Station defeated conventional forces because they understood our dependencies and exploited them. They jammed communications, disrupted sensors, and created environments where technological advantages were minimized. But they couldn't prepare for someone who didn't depend on those advantages. The lecture hall fell quiet as officers across the galaxy processed these ideas. Elena could see the wheels turning in their minds as they reconsidered fundamental assumptions about modern warfare. Admiral Corson spoke first. Specialist Vasquez, the Galactic Defense Corps is prepared to implement cross-training programs based on your recommendations. We want Earth military advisors assigned to training facilities across the galaxy. More than that, added General Fox, we want to establish an exchange program. Our best officers should train with Earth's Defense Corps to learn these fundamental techniques. Elena felt a surge of pride, not for herself, but for her ancestors who had developed and passed down the skills that were now being recognized as valuable across the galaxy. Admirals and generals, she said, Earth's Defense Corps would be honored to share our training methods. But remember, these techniques work because they're based on centuries of experience and continuous refinement. They can't be learned quickly or casually. They require dedication, practice, and a willingness to accept that the oldest ways are sometimes the best ways. As the assembly began to break up into smaller discussions about implementation and logistics, Commander Scylla approached Elena privately. Specialist, she said quietly, I want to formally request assignment to Earth for training. I've been a soldier for 20 years, and I thought I understood warfare. Kythera Station taught me that I still have much to learn. Elena smiled and extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship. Commander, any soldier willing to admit they can still learn is someone worth teaching. Earth's training facilities will welcome you. As Elena packed up her rifle and prepared to leave, she overheard conversations throughout the hall that would soon spread to military academies across the galaxy. Individual skill still matters, even in the age of advanced technology. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective one. We need to stop depending so heavily on our equipment and start developing our people. Earth's military traditions have something valuable to teach us. Elena smiled as she left the academy. The galaxy was beginning to understand what her family had known for generations. Technology was a tool, but skill was what made the tool effective. Weapons could be improved and upgraded, but the fundamentals of warfare, precision, training, adaptability, and determination remained constant across centuries and species. Her ancient rifle had done more than save 2,000 hostages at Kythera Station. It had reminded the galaxy that individual excellence and traditional skills still had value in an age of overwhelming technological advancement. As Elena boarded the transport that would take her to her next assignment, she thought about her ancestors who had carried this rifle through the wars of Earth's past. They had passed down more than just a weapon. They had passed down a philosophy of warfare that valued precision over volume, skill over technology, and individual determination over overwhelming force. Now that philosophy was spreading across the galaxy, carried by officers who had learned that sometimes the oldest ways were still the best ways. Elena's rifle had become a symbol of something the galaxy had almost forgotten, that wars were won not by the most advanced weapons, but by the individuals skilled enough to use any weapon with perfect effectiveness. The legend of Elena Vasquez and her ancient Earth rifle had become something more than a story about one remarkable combat operation. It had become a reminder that in a galaxy of advanced civilizations and overwhelming technology, individual skill and determination could still change the course of history. 8 rounds, 15 targets, 2,000 lives saved, and a galaxy that would never again underestimate the power of human ingenuity, training, and an ancient rifle in the hands of someone who knew exactly how to use it.